Hi, it's good to be back with you. Welcome along. Another 2020 and a program today where we might hope to get some real Christian commentary around what's been happening on our shores here in Australia. You will be aware that late yesterday, two gunmen opened fire from a footbridge onto a Hanukkah celebration at Bondi Beach in Sydney. And you know, this tragedy marks Australia's deadliest mass shooting since Port Arthur back in 1996, deeply shaking the community and prompting nationwide mourning. So that's where our conversation will go. And there'll be some special elements in our conversation today on 2020, a 2020 take. There are lots of details, and Vision National News doing a wonderful job keeping us abreast of updates, even as those new things are breaking and we're understanding some more about the terror attack. But we're going to turn our attention a little later, around about 25 minutes from now, parents of small children. In the wake of this latest terror attack. And now it's on our shores after the unfolding of yesterday's Bondi attack. But when children witness or experience tragedy, your guidance and input as a parent is crucial to the level of recovery that can occur. So are children traumatised by the images they're seeing on television and on social media around what happened at Bondi? Well, we are going to be talking about parents and children, how you deal with the very dramatic circumstances, traumatic circumstances that have happened on our shores late yesterday. Brett and Kate Ryan will be joining us, of course, from Focus on the Family. They say each child is different and there'll be some unique reactions to the terror attack. Brett and Kate Ryan lead Focus on the Family in Australia. We'll be talking all things around the attack throughout the morning today here on 2020. And before that, of course, unpacking some thoughts from the Australian Christian Lobby. And always good to welcome Nicholas Lay, who's the Northern Territory Director for the ACL. Hey, Nicholas, welcome along to 2020.
Good morning, Neil. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Nicholas, you know, I'm interested in hearing your heartbeat. I think listeners will be able to hear a lot of details and they'll get a lot of statistics listening into news. But I'm wondering how you were feeling when this news began to break and we were seeing unfolding on our screens a dramatic terror attack happening on our shores and in Bondi Beach. How were you feeling?
Yeah, Neil, it's deeply devastating to see the news, to see the images. You know, when we heard about it, you know, some friends told us that it was unfolding, and so immediately, you know, looked for more details of what was going on, and yeah, it was devastating. And through it, when we were looking through it, and we realised this was such a significant event, deeply devastating. I remember my wife said to me, "I think we just need to stop and pray," because you can get pretty bogged down in the gruesome details of it and what unfolded, and feel pretty hopeless. So I suppose just spending this time in prayer to God, giving this to God, hoping that His peace will be upon people. You know, we know in the scriptures, in the Psalms, it says the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. And so just praying that He is close to those that have been affected by this tragedy.
And you know, as we were watching things unfold and we're saying, you know, who is under attack here? You know, the thoughts going through my suspicion is most people's mind. Do those gunmen look like they are Middle Eastern oriented terrorists? And, you know, you run the risk of tarring everyone with the same brush, or the assumption that somehow or other this might, for a change, not be a Islamic-focused terror attack. But, you know, those sorts of things were running through people's minds. How do you think the general community would be responsive to this thought that here's another terror attack and this has reached our shores?
Yeah, I mean, for Australia, it's a fairly uncommon thing for us to experience. But like you mentioned, we all got the footage pretty quickly, and worked out what was going on pretty early. This was a Hanukkah event, and it was a specific attack on the Jewish community. And it's just so terrible to see that this rise in anti-Semitism has reached this point, something that's been bubbling along for a long time, and now we've seen quite a catastrophe occur in this regard.
You know, anti-Semitism bubbling along for a long time, over 2 years since the October 7 attacks, and there's been a lot of statements and commentary that's come from the Australian Christian lobby. We've seen an awakening of anti-Semitism in Australia because of this. I wonder, you know, as in your position, one of the directors, by way of you're a director in the Northern Territory for Australian Christian Lobby, you know, is it any surprise that there has now been a terror attack? Because, I mean, the terror expectation level has been probable coming from our national security authorities. Here it is. It's happened, and I suspect a warning has been there all along that the government has not been doing enough or doing the wrong things.
Yeah, it's not surprising in one regard. Obviously, it's shocking, and it's hard to believe, but it has been bubbling along for some time. And I mean, a lot of the commentary around this has already been that, you know, many people have been warning about this. I looked at Jacinta Price's statement this morning, and her words was that it was foreseeable, so that something like this would happen. It was, people could see that it was escalating, and that something like this could probably happen. And yeah, that's been proven, unfortunately.
I'll get your impression as to the way people will react to the Prime Minister's words. Here's a little clip from the Prime Minister, and you might say, yes, at a time like this, these are words you would expect to hear. Let's have a little listen in.
Amidst this vile act of violence and hate will emerge a moment of national unity, where Australians across the board will embrace their fellow Australians of Jewish faith at this dark moment for our nation. Our police and security agencies are working to determine anyone associated with this outrage. Our agencies will provide you with factual updates as quickly as possible as they continue to emerge.
Okay, Prime Minister, and made that statement last night, shortly after things had unfolded to the point where we recognised that this was a major terror event. What were your thoughts about the Prime Minister's words?
Yeah, they were short, sharp, what you kind of expect from it. I'm glad that he was quick to label it an attack, an anti-Semitic attack, because there was a bit of slow reporting with that. Like you said, we could all kind of work it out from the social media that was going on. So grateful that wasn't sort of kept under wraps for a long time. Yeah, obviously there's going to be a broad, lengthy, in-depth political discussion about policy, where the failings were, what could be done more, and what are the solutions. And I think it is an important time for Christians to stand up, to give godly wisdom, praying for discernment in these matters. You know, these are complicated matters, so we all need to be praying for wisdom and discernment from God in how to tackle this. But obviously there is going to be a broader discussion going into the political realm of what's next, a very detailed look at those sort of things.
I find that typically, Nicholas, Christians embrace Jewish people. Sometimes because of a biblical foundation, the people of God, the people of Israel, the covenant of Abraham with the land. Sometimes it's along those lines. Other times Christians are saying, well, everyone has the right to be able to live their lives in some level of harmony and peace. The idea of embracing the people of Jewish faith, and that's a sentiment that the Prime Minister also reflected. This is important, isn't it? This is not just about the Jewish people. This is about all Australians under attack. But this focus on the Jewish people becomes a very, very important thing.
Yeah, very important. Like we've seen, it's been absolutely devastating for them, and kind of confirming what a lot of the discussions has been around. Like, for example, I was talking to a Jewish organization recently, and we are talking about anti-Semitism, and we're talking about the Never Again Is Now rallies and kind of bringing awareness around this particular issue, and maybe in my naivety talking about, well, maybe you could join one here or there and whatnot, and their kind of response to me was, well, why would we organize a group gathering, and we're very afraid to do that, and so that was quite an early insight for myself of the fear that is there, and so more today.
So when we think of Christians, and there's a level of fear in there, as you very, I think, correctly identify, Christians and the thought of being available and being a physical presence at a public demonstration, do you think this is something that the Christian community, and it starts at every individual and then goes to families and then wider communities, is this something we're not doing enough of, a public physical demonstration of solidarity with Jewish people, solidarity with the idea of taking a side against terror?
Yeah, I think we need to stand up against terrorism, stand up against this hate, and stand with those affected. And so standing up is important, and we've seen that in Australia, people standing against Israel, and the impact that that's had. We've seen the impact that that's had, and so we can fight the darkness with light, be the light in the darkness, and stand up for life, and stand against hate.
There's talk about a worldwide intifada, a rising up against Jewish people all over the world. So it's not just restricted in the Middle East. And you've got this media propaganda that seems to flow into our mainstream media, which is pro-Palestinian. And pro-Palestinian usually means pro-Hamas, and that usually means pro-terror. And while typical Christians might look at mainstream media reports and wonder why anyone is reporting these things in the way that they do, any thoughts here on media and reporting and any necessities that might need to change now that really here on our shore we're seeing the fruit of where that propaganda leads?
Yeah, look, it's quite bizarre. I remember October 7 and how quickly things spiraled out of control after that date. Like how quickly the anti-Semitism came about, how quickly the pro-Palestinian movement gained legs, gained traction, mainstream. Even here in where I live in Alice Springs in the Northern Territory, there's been countless demonstrations and all the rest, and the media getting behind that, supporting, in supporting Palestine, supporting Hamas, and rewarding the terrorism that we see overseas. And I think this hopefully will be a time, terrible situation. We know God can make good out of bad situations. He can bring forth good out of bad situations. So hopefully God brings the good out of this, in terms of people turning to Him for comfort, for salvation, for hope, for peace, for love, but also that we see this kind of change of thinking about these things, and that they can actually have such a big impact. Often we talk about politics and policies and all the rest, and people argue about how big of an impact they have, but we know that the media and Australia's policy has such a big impact in how these things come about, whether they grow and turn into something very ugly and something very deadly.
Media and political policy, and of course there are people who are in politics who have the ear of the media and therefore the ear of the nation. So when we talk about an anti-Semitic mind virus, This is very much a part of what happens when you've got alternative parties, and I'm quite happy to name the Greens in all of that, who've been very, very anti-Semitic in the way that they've been such pro-Palestinian supporters and got lots of media coverage. And, of course, that has moved into all sorts of the left side of politics and, perhaps, the right side of politics too. Let's not leave anyone out of this. This mind virus, it has extended. And so when you've got all sorts of politicians and the media reporting, it's a very, very difficult situation. It's very hard to turn around, isn't it?
It is, but as we know, with God, all things are possible. And I think us being the salt of the earth, light of the world, being the light in the darkness, can have a huge impact. And yes, we may experience persecution for it, and as we've seen with the Jewish people, they've experienced persecution. But it's no surprise that we would in these scenarios. So, not being in the world, being in the world but not of the world, and being the light in the darkness, and standing up for truth, for love, and for God's kingdom, and for would.
Nicholas, when you reflected on the fact that you're in Alice Springs and there's been all sorts of protests on the streets of Alice Springs, and it's a long throw from Sydney, and it just demonstrates, doesn't it, that right throughout the whole of Australia there's been a permeation of this anti-Semitism. And for the Christian, because Christians are also drawn, because one way or the other, it's a little bit like I heard something, but I didn't hear an alternative view. Seeking out alternative views that will give you a balanced understanding of what's going on and a Christian view of what might be going on. How do you encourage Christian believers to dig a little deeply? And my suspicion is that if you have a pro-Palestinian position as a Christian, you haven't really been exposed to some of the biblical foundation and some of the ways that you're seeing things worked out, and coming from a Christian faith foundation as to what ought to happen for some level of harmony. Any thoughts here about Christians and digging a little deeper to actually understand what it is to support a side which is about peace and is about protection rather than this sort of evil terror focus?
Yeah, I mean, first off, the rank is listen to Neil Johnson on 20Twenty. He's a great insight for these things. But yeah, I think digging deeper on this issue, look into it. We've obviously been in this space a long time, and attending the rallies and putting out information about anti-Semitism and the Palestinian state and all the rest. So obviously you can follow the Australian Christian Lobby as well. But there's many advocates out there. And I think looking past the mainstream kind of media and representation, digging a little deeper, like you said, and comparing it to biblical truth, what you read in your Bible. It's there to help us, to guide us. And when something doesn't seem right, doesn't smell right, there's a chance you need to look a little deeper.
And Nicholas, there's a lot of things that you deal with in the Australian Christian Lobby, and for listeners who are not quite so familiar, of course, you're in the Northern Territory, but there are state directors in Queensland and New South Wales and Victoria and South Australia and Western Australia. There's directors. Do you get together and you're talking through these issues? You're talking about, where the ACL might stand in all of this and what sort of lobbying that you might be responsible for when it comes to these sorts of issues. Is there a group meeting planned anytime soon for the ACL state directors to get together and plan some direction for how you might be forming some more thoughts about how this is unfolding?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a weekly exercise. We meet regularly to check where things are up to, if we need to respond to anything quickly. Certainly, this is going to be a major event. and already we're discussing where to from here, how we can best advocate, how we can use our voice in the public square with politicians, in the media, to advocate for good change in this area, advocate for a situation like this not occurring again. So we do it regularly, and certainly coming into 2026, we'll be meeting intensely to plot a plan forward for 2026. And so, yeah, definitely praying for wisdom in that. So people could be praying for wisdom for us in discerning that, but also for our political leaders, our politicians, national security.
All right, I think we've just lost Nicholas there. Nicholas Lay, the Northern Territory Director for the Australian Christian Lobby. Nicholas, appreciate you. I think I've lost you from there. We're going to continue our coverage, and just ahead too, look forward to how parents can help to deal with the images that no doubt children will be exposed to when there's such coverage of a event like this Bondi massacre. We're going to be talking to the Australian Christian Lobby before too long. We'll get that ahead. Just do bear with us, and continuing in just a short while. It's the Katinas, I believe. You're on Vision Christian Radio. Neil Johnson with you on today's 2020 as we're reflecting on the tragedy that marks really Australia's deadliest mass shooting since Port Arthur back in 1996. The community is deeply shaken, and there is a nationwide mourning that's happening for Jewish people here on our shores here in Australia. Well, Mark Leach is co-founder of Never Again Is Now. He's joining us this morning from the memorial at Bondi Beach that has sprung up. Mark, a special welcome back to 2020.
Hi, Neil. Great to be with you this morning and with your listeners.
Mark, just reminding listeners, Never Again Is Now. It began very, very shortly after the October 7 terror attack, the attacks and then the protest on the 8th. And listeners might remember you, Mark, as the Jewish Christian man who was apprehended by police because you were on the street near the Sydney Opera House near the protest by pro-Palestinians. Hey, this morning you are at the memorial at Bondi Beach. Mark, what are you seeing there around there, and what sort of conversations are you having?
Oh, it's very, very somber. As you said, I've been since October the 7th and the rally that ended up that disastrous event at the Opera House on October the 9th. I've been warning Australians that this is coming, trying to mobilise Christians to stand up against this evil of political Islam and stand with the Jewish community. And now it's arrived. And look, the atmosphere here is just very somber. People are shocked. People are bringing flowers. There's lots of non-Jewish community members coming down. I've just had a long conversation with a close friend of mine who was at the event, was here last night with her young daughter and experienced the shooting. And, you know, everyone just feels numb. It feels surreal, dystopian. That jihad, Islamic terrorism has come to Australia many of us have been saying it's a matter of when, not if, and now we know what it looks like. And,
there have been warnings, haven't there, of a worldwide intifada, which really says there's an overflow of the violence that we've seen in the Middle East, and no country is safe. Somehow or other, maybe we didn't believe that it would reach Australia, but this is it, and you've been warning about this.
Yes, look, the week in, week out, the people on our streets who've been calling to globalise the intifada, well, this is exactly what it looks like. This is the terrorism that killed over 1,000 Israelis in the first and second intifadas, just random evil destruction. And so here it is. And I think Australia, we're this amazingly blessed country where these problems don't come to our shores, except now they have. And we need to, look, to be honest, Neil, we need to hold our politicians to account. We need to hold our community leaders to account. And, these events don't occur in a vacuum. This is, Here we go. So Susan Lee and the opposition parliamentarians are here laying wreaths at the moment. So
Yes, I'm aware that the Prime Minister was there early this morning, laying a wreath or some flowers.
Yes,
Susan Lay, she's arrived there now, even as we speak. You can see her there, and she's there for, really, I mean, in some sense here, what we're seeing is an outpouring now from our politicians. They say one thing when there is an attack, but their actions speak louder than words. When you said we need to hold our politicians to account, what are you hoping they might do? Because there's been a whole bunch of things that have been pro-Palestinian and anti-Semitic. What sort of things come to mind for you, Mark, as to where you think our politicians ought to be taking some direct action?
Well, my view is that we're building a citizen movement across the country so that at every local, state and federal election, voters are thinking about these issues when they go to the poll, and they're going to vote along the lines of which politicians have policies in place that will keep us safe from political Islamic terrorism, which politicians have policies in place that are supportive of the state of Israel and will not side with the terrorists who massacre Israelis and the terrorists who massacre Australians, and which politicians will have policies in place which will keep Australia safe and free and united. And so we need to, that's how you hold politicians to account. In the end, it's at the ballot box. So that's what we want. We want politicians to have policies that will keep Australia safe and free, support the state of Israel, and stand against the racist right, stand against the jihadist Islamic threat, and preserve our country the way we all know we want it to be preserved.
When we think of our government, and we might be even thinking over a number of election cycles, from where I sit, I've been able to identify different times when the move against Israel and towards pro-Palestine has given some rise to anti-Semitism, to the point where Jewish people have been fearful in their homes and on the streets, and even thinking of leaving Australia. I mean, have Australians missed something in here? Because the way that our politicians have behaved has taken us down this route where Jewish Australians have been afraid of being in their homes and going on their street and doing their celebrations and worship. Thoughts from you on that?
Yes, I absolutely agree. From that first rally on the 9th of October 23, when they ended up at the Opera House, that should have been shut down straight away. Our politicians have given license to the anti-Semites to march on our streets, to incite violence. And I think, policies like calling for the establishment of the state of Palestine, while the terrorist regime Hamas was still intent on massacring and destroying Jews, recognizing and legitimating Hamas in that way absolutely emboldens the jihadists in Australia and convinces them that it's just a matter of time before the West falls and Israel falls and they win. And the way you defeat your enemies is convincing them that they stand no chance ever of defeating you. They have to get that message. So we need strong, confident Christian leadership in this moment.
I don't know what the federal government will do in response. Let me just speculate. The typical thing is they'll plough more money into mental health programs for the Muslim community. I'm wondering if you've got any thoughts around what happens on the other side of this, because there are propaganda arms that will actually look to enlarge the Islamic presence in Australia because of an act like this. What goes on in your mind, Mark Leach, around these sorts of things, and how governments respond, and oftentimes actually continues to throw some fuel on the fire?
Yes, well, I would hope our government have learnt their lesson, and the answer is we need to hold them to account. They need to know that if they do not address this threat to us, they will be elected, they will be voted out. So the typical response as well is to in a couple of days, everyone's going to start saying, well, we've got to protect the Muslim community from pushback, and Islamophobia gets raised as a way of deflecting from the jihadist threat. So our governments, we need to educate Australia about the theological roots of this conflict and the spiritual roots. So it's a wake-up for Australia. There's real evil, and I think the opportunity is there for the church, for followers of Jesus, because we understand we've got the spiritual resources, we understand the spiritual battle we're in, we've got the organizational resources, we've got the votes, we've got the money, we've just got to harness it and deploy it for the common good in this season.
In a very secularized nation that we have, people in politics and in leadership roles tend to diminish or deflect any sort of religious connections, and so doing away with the religious roots. As you say, Christians have got a very important role here, recognising that there are religious issues. There's an old saying, after Saturday comes Sunday. So for the Christian community, after Saturday being the Jewish people, comes Sunday, the Christians, there is a sense that there is a risk and there is threat and there is potential for conflict between Islamic communities and even the Christian communities. It's the focus on the Jewish communities right now, but the whole idea of understanding covenant, the people of Israel, God in the mix there, and what it is to be a Christian believer, these sorts of things, these are the only things that these are the things that Christians are strong on, but no one else wants to listen to. Any thoughts from you around that, how we actually cut through?
I think the first thing is we need revival and renewal in the churches. Christians need to live as Christians and understand the implications of the gospel for their lives and for society. And we need to look beyond Australia and say our fellow believers are being massacred by jihadists around the world. The persecution of Christians around the world is a real thing. So it's not just a Jewish problem. This is a Christian problem. This is a problem for our civilization. So we need to pray, we need to get educated, we need to get mobilized, we need to get engaged as communities of Christians, and say, the days when we could all just say our prayers on a Sunday, have a wonderful worship experience, and then Australia just sails along as this wonderful, peaceful country, those days are over, I'm afraid.
Mark, you're on Bondi Beach today. You're at the memorial that has sprung up overnight, and you've seen politicians coming and they're leaving their flowers. Are you going to be hanging around Bondi today? Are there people talking to you? Is the media asking you all sorts of things? Are you getting mainstream media approaches?
Not yet, because I'm just in the background. And happy for the Jewish community it's the time for their voice to be heard. But I'm here all day. We've got all the clergy of this region are coming here at 4 p.m, so we will get some media attention there. We'll do a statement, and we're going to do a walk of solidarity, lay some flowers as the church leaders of this area. So I'm very delighted that they're stepping up to help.
Church leaders, do you have a network that you call on for various public statements in times like this?
We do. There are a variety of networks like that. This is one of those. So we don't want to. You know what? Between you and me, I'm sure no one else is listening, but between you and me and your listeners, I'm a little tired of statements. Everyone makes a statement. It's got to translate into sustained action in the years ahead to mobilize the community, the Christian community, to stand with the Jewish community and stand with Israel and hold our governments to account. That's what counts. I don't actually care what you say. Talk is cheap. What I want to see is change behavior on the part of the Christian leaders around this country.
Well, I want to point listeners to connecting with Mark Leach. Mark, you will be a significant voice in the days ahead. And if the mainstream media is not looking for you, search them out and, put yourself forward. That's my encouragement to you. But I'll always appreciate your insights. And I know that listeners can connect with you at neveragainisnow.com.au. Never again is now, and never again has happened again. So for listeners, connect with Mark Leach, neveragainisnow.com.au. And Mark, appreciate you very much, and hopefully we'll get to talk again just very quickly, not too distant future. Thanks so much for your insights today.
Anytime, Neil. God bless. Thank you very much.
And just ahead, we're going to be talking about children and how we as parents deal with issues around the trauma that they might experience, even seeing these things on their screens, whether it's television or on social media or however they are now getting their insights into what's going on in our nation. Back with Focus on the Family in just a few moments. Well, it has been a series of terrible things that we've been seeing on our screens, and turning some attention now to parents of small children in the wake of this latest terror attack. And now it's on our shores after the unfolding of yesterday's Bondi terror attack against the Jewish community. But our children, your children, when they are witnessing or experiencing tragedy, your guidance as a parent is crucial to the level of recovery that can occur. Well, Brett Ryan is joining us. Brett and Kate lead Focus on the Family in Australia. And, they say that every child's different. They say that there's unique reactions from each of our children to these sorts of things. Brett Ryan, a special welcome back to 2020 to you.
It's a pleasure.
Brett, what's been going through your mind as you have seen the events of late yesterday unfolding and then appreciating your concern for families? What's been going through your mind? How did you feel when this unfolded?
Unfortunately, it's not a surprise. We live in a fallen and broken world, and with the current state of political decisions that have been made, these type of events, unfortunately, were inevitable. But I'm not here to, point the blame. Those things are going to be in the post-game analysis, if you like, in the coming days. But right now, I'm feeling for how do we protect our children? We can't keep them in bubble wrap. We can't pretend that it's not happening and keep their head in the sand. They're going to see it. They're going to hear it. And we need to be aware of our own emotions, this is as parents, and how we're processing this, and not to overexpose it, because it's on every media outlet. It's in the social media platforms. Unfortunately, the government have put in that, under the age of 16 aren't meant to be on social media platforms, but it's going to, infiltrate into their hearts and minds and ears, and it can be quite frightening and disconcerting. And mums and dads need to be aware that they're going to put it through the lens of a child. It's hard enough as an adult, but even though it happened in Sydney, this could happen anywhere and across Australia. And that can actually strike a level of fear, but we don't want fear to win. We don't want the enemy to win. We want to be able to keep our hearts and minds and try to keep and protect our kids, but we can't pretend that it's not happening.
This is the object of terrorists, isn't it? To intimidate and to create fear and to create anxiety. That's the way the terrorist mind works. An attack on people makes everyone fearful. You wonder, should I go to the shopping centre? Should I go to the beach? What if I'm in the middle of something like this? Now, clearly there's going to be some common sense involved. If there is an attack in progress, you wouldn't go near it. But a lot of people might even be thinking, I better adjust my life now because of yesterday's incident. I'm interested in the fact that you say it's how we process these things. We process things differently, and we're mindful that our children are watching us. So how we react now around the dinner table or in those circumstances and conversations with our children, these are important, aren't they, Brett?
Oh, they are. And everyone's entitled to their opinion, but our kids are listening and watching us. And you may not think that they're absorbing or by sheer osmosis. But so if you're talking about this with a neighbour or you're talking about this with a family friend, they're going to hear what you're talking about. And if they don't know the full context of how you're analysing it, they're going to take our lead. And so if we're living in fear, guess what they're going to do? They're going to live in fear. But we don't want, as I said, the enemy to win. And we need to, and as it says in the Bible, fear not, for I will be with you. And our Heavenly Father will be there. It's not a surprise to him, unfortunately. And there's a whole lot of different things and discussions, theological, about how could God allow those things. But our kids are going to ask these questions. And we need to be as well prepared for it as possible. And we have got a resource that we've used in the past, but it seems very relevant. It's called Parenting in the Midst of Tragedy. And it talks about some things that you could do, keeping the routines with your kids, allowing them to feel their emotions and coming alongside them, not to be dismissive of them, to be not the only voice. They may not want to talk to you, but they might talk to somebody else. So there's a variety of different things we need to do. So we need to be as well informed to how to navigate this with our children.
Some might say, there's trauma when you're directly involved in an event. But does trauma happen just because we are exposed to the images, the sights and the sounds and the commentary and the constant replay of the action that happened on the day? There is a traumatizing sense, isn't there? And even as adults, we get to experience that, but it's even more significant for children whose emotional state has not matured the same way that ours perhaps has as a parent. We've got to take extra care with our children, Brett.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, our kids have seen things, civil disputes and wars overseas. They've heard of shootings across the United States. But when it happens in our own backyard, and we might think, well, it's not, if we're in Perth or if we're in South Australia or in Queensland, it's not. But they also have they're going through trauma, even natural disasters, fires and floods. This is just another part of the trauma. So we need to protect our kids. But when we hear the word Bondi, I mean, that's synonymous with Australia. So Australia is a big place, but it's still, these are our brothers and our sisters in our nation, and they can feel it. That secondary trauma is very real, and we as adults, as I've already said, sets the tone, and we need to be very mindful that, our kids are going to ask questions, and we need to allow them to ask the questions, and we need to be able to give them a response. And to be honest, we may not have all the answers because this is a very confusing time. Why is there so much hate in the world, Mummy and Daddy? Why do people treat one another badly? Well, that's a great question, and it's very sad. And you explain how you're feeling because they feel like, if Mum and Daddy are going through, they're processing, I can also process this and move forward. When there's a tragedy, if we dismiss it and not talk about it, it will come to surface later on. So this is a great opportunity to talk about it with our children, whether it is the shooting in Bondi or whether it's natural disasters or any other trauma. We need to actually come and see it through the lens of a child because they don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the skills to actually process this. And we have to be their prefrontal cortex and to be their comforter because we're going to be able to come alongside them and we're going to be their reality. And then if those have got a faith, then we can actually say, God, this must break God's heart. What do you think God's thinking about this when he sees his people treating one another as badly as this? And then they can actually feel it. I never thought about God grieving this. I never seen him thinking that he could be sad. And then they can actually say, well, I'm sad as well. God must be sad as well.
I'm interested in that practical side. Do parents go silent and not talk about these things? Or do we talk about them in such detail that it might be above the age and maturity of our children? Clearly, some age focus for what's appropriate is going to be important in there, and that's going to adjust the way that you might respond to your children. If you've got just toddlers or young children or going into teenage years, a few different approaches that you might have to have, and you might have to have some special conversations with your older children, maybe apart from your younger children. How do you think as a parent? Yep.
Yeah, very much so. The fact is, as I said, we can't protect them. They're going to see it, but we don't want to overwhelm them, and we don't need to listen to all the media reports. We don't have to read every article or every social media post. Everyone's going to be entitled to opinion, and even reading the opinions, it's so divisive at this time. They are not needing that, so we need to protect them from that. And every child, as you said, is unique, and every child is different in how they see the world. Some kids, it's not even going to register. They're not even going to worry about it. They think it's in Sydney. It's not going to affect me. I'm going to move on with my life. And there's other kids who are very sensitive and very emotionally in tune, and they're going to be affected differently. So every child, we need to come alongside them. Now, I've said this on numerous other occasions. We need to be students of our children. Students of them, understand what makes them tick, what drives them, why they think and the way that they act. And then we can come alongside them and parent them uniquely as God has uniquely parented us, because we're not on one size fits all. Neither are our children.
Brett Ryan is our guest. He and Kate lead Focus on the Family in Australia. He mentioned a resource called Parenting in the Midst of Tragedy. You might want to access that at families.org.au, continuing our conversation with Brett Ryan after Vision National News. Wonderful to have you along with us on what is a sad and mournful day, given the latest terror attack at Bondi Beach. Look, I have been inviting Christian leaders for their responses, so we won't open our talkback lines today. But if you did want to send us a text, 0447 488 316, and I may try to air some of those texts very briefly. One came through from Judy, who says, "Hi Neil," and this was back when Mark Leach was on with us. "After Saturday comes Sunday," because that's the reference to Jewish people and then Christian people, Saturday and Sunday. "I'm an infidel Christian," says Judy. "Why are Jews being targeted first? Wouldn't they target me now?" Well, of course, as was reflected in that conversation with Mark Leach, Christians cannot afford to be in any way blasé about what has happened, because, yes, Christians potentially too are in the firing line. In fact, if you look at what's happening around the world, and a big spotlight has been on the nation of Nigeria of recent weeks, where something like 7,000 Christians have been killed at the hands of Islamic terrorists just this year. So just bringing that into context, hey, turning some attention to some of the dimensions you might not be hearing anywhere, but as a parent, I know you'll be wanting to hear what Brett Ryan has to say. Brett and Kate lead Focus on the Family in Australia, and so we've been talking about children in the wake of the latest terror attack. And while a child witnesses or experiences a tragedy, or is even seeing these things on our screens, your guidance as a parent and input as a parent are crucial to the level of recovery that will occur. Brett Ryan is with us. Brett, just to come back to some of the practical things that we might be interested in as parents. You mentioned that there are a number of practical things we could do just before the news. Recount some of those, because I know there'll be parents thinking, well, okay, what am I supposed to do here? My kids are exposed to these things. What should I do, Brett Ryan?
Yeah, well, there's a lot involved. But the thing is, treating life as normal as possible is going to be a key. The normal routines, sleep, eating times, having fun with the kids, doing activities are going to be welcome distractions rather than just listening or watching all the news reports. They need to know that you are safe. You are going to be there with them during this time, because there's still going to be aftermath. There's more and more discussions, and it will dissipate, and then there'll be another tragedy, unfortunately. Just that's how life works. But right now, your kids need to feel safe, and because there's a lot of uncertainty, they're going to feel like their rhythms are being compromised. So we need to be very intentional to ensure the daily rhythms take place. And, having fun, and they're going to have questions, and encourage them to ask questions. You don't have to overwhelm them with a deep and meaningful answer, but just little bits, and drip feed it, and checking on them today. They might be saying, I'm fine, but tomorrow they're not. There's a highs and lows, the roller coaster of emotions. And so we need to accept our kids' emotions, and they may, as I said earlier, they may not want to talk to you, but they might want to talk to grandma and grandpa, or they may want to talk about this with an auntie or an uncle. Whatever it may be, they need to feel that you've given them the space. And, you know, you can't avoid discussing with the kids, but you don't want to overwhelm them at the same time. And then, as I said, bring in their faith, bring the faith into it. You know, this is a very tragic thing, and God is heartbroken. And for those who maybe want to go a different level, we've got a resource that says making sense when God doesn't make sense. And there's a variety of things. When we do hear these tragic things, we need to have an answer. It's all very well to say, you know, God is there in the midst of this tragedy. Yes, he is. He is absolutely. And we know that all things can work together for our good. Absolutely. And he will be there during the pain. But right now, the whole nation is hurting. And people want to blame someone and point the finger, and anger and hatred has been rife. So let's bring it back to our household. How do you think we should do as a family? How should we speak to one another in our household? Bring it back to a great object lesson about how we talk to our siblings. How do we talk to one another? How can we serve and be kind to those who are different from us? These are great lessons we can use in a springboard for our family.
Do some practical things, keep the routines, even having fun with children and making life as normal as possible. But when that question comes, or when that image appears, and I suspect here your countenance is going to change, Brett Ryan. You're going to go from smiling, happy, fun mum and dad to maybe a little bit more somber and try and make sense of that moment with your own children. And as we said, age appropriate. You know, when people do trauma counselling, it's really talking about the issue. And my suspicion is hearing the heart of your child before helping to make sense is going to be the main thing, rather than rushing into some sort of monologue about what they ought to believe about what's going on. This sort of respect for your child is going to be important, isn't it? Just to hear the heart of your child, to know whether they are traumatised by what they're seeing.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we want our family's well-being at the utmost in this, and we don't have all the answers because it doesn't make sense. This is a tragedy, and it should never have happened, but it has happened. And life has changed for all of us in some way, but life can move forward, even amongst the pain, even amongst the trauma and tragedy. But as a family, we can actually say, hey, our family, we're going to stay loving and caring for one another. And what do you think we could do for somebody else? And maybe that's part of the healing process. Every child's different. They might want to write a letter to some of the families that have lost their lives, loved ones. They may want to be able to donate. They may want to be able to draw a picture. Just being kind, even to a stranger right now, may be the best lesson they can do. Very therapeutic. And as they're coming to the end of school, they're going to have a little bit more time on their hands. They may be listening to things. It is going to change their view of the world, because they want to feel safe. They want to know that mum and dad are going to protect them. And it appears that this hasn't been the case. And then they're going to say, oh, well, we're not going to go to the shops, or we're not going to go to the church anymore. We're not going to, and we can't live in fear. We, as the parents, need to say, hey, the enemy, Satan, is not going to win this, because that's what they want us. The terrorists, whether it's just individuals or whether it's a wider group, we have no idea. We can't fill in the blanks, and we need to use facts. But at the same time, we need to be able to help our kids say, hey, we are going to live our life to its full. And that's what Jesus came. In John 10:10, Jesus came to give us life and life to its full. And we need to live that out with our children.
And as parents, we've got to be one step ahead of where our kids are at. Come back to nitty-gritty Christian principle and understanding here, Brett. Acknowledging the reality of moral evil in the world, and at the same time, this understanding of maintaining faith in God, because ultimately he triumphs over evil. but the origin of moral evil, the fall. Sometimes we have difficulties, don't we, in trying to make sense of what happens with natural disasters, because it's a different sort of evil. But certainly moral evil, we can trace back. We've got some firm answers for our kids when we talk about, a fallen nature, a humanity that's been corrupted by sin, and this is the fruit of it. Explaining those sorts of things to our kids, helping them to be able to see the world the way God sees the world. How do you reflect on that as for parents?
Well, I love the verse where it says in Psalm 34, verse 18, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." We have all got broken hearts at this time. And now we're saying that God is there in the midst of this tragedy. And we have to continue to remind them and trust that God is sovereign, even amongst these circumstances, even though it will pain his heart. But that is the end result of disobedience. That is the end result of hate. That is the end result of not allowing people to have various opinions. And unfortunately, that can be very confusing. So it does open up great conversations for talk about our faith, our trust in God, and knowing that he is our hope and our future. And he is in the midst, even in our suffering. And that may not necessarily make sense to a child when they see these things happening, but the more that we continue to press in, the more that we can remind them that God is still sovereign, he's still in charge, and by his love and his grace, we can rely on him even amongst this. And really, as parents, we are the first glimpse of who God really is. Is he loving? Is he caring? Is he thoughtful? Is he kind? Is he considerate? Is he making you feel safe? When we put it through the lens, the way in which we live our lives is going to be a glimpse of who they believe God is going to be.
And good, godly parenting isn't a removal of any thoughts of what might be bad and might be evil. When we're reminded that, even in last days, there'll be wars and rumours of wars. Somehow or other, in the mix of our parenting, our children have to be understanding that there is an us against them, even good versus evil battle that's going on, and lives are lost, people are traumatised. These sorts of things, we don't necessarily shield our children in an unfair way. They need to know, because this is really what a parent does in preparing a child in resilience to face the world oncoming, isn't it? I mean, this is one of the rubber hits the road moments for parents, and you might even say opportunity for a parent to really bring their children into the reality of what is. We thought these things were just happening overseas. All of a sudden, it's on our shore. Parents in the mix there. I mean, I think there's a lot of parents who will be very appreciative of this good advice you're giving here, Brett Ryan. We thought we were removed, but we're not. This is the reality. Now is an opportunity. Is it an opportunity to you? Do you see this for parents? A moment?
So. I mean, I was just going to bring back a little bit of the social media ban. I mean, that may seem controversial, and I'm more than happy to talk about that. But the fact is, the idea was to protect our kids on those social media platforms. So children under the age of 16 are not going to be exposed. So we can actually say, hey, this sort of censorship, for want for a better word, is going to be protecting our kids. We want to protect our kids, but we can't shield them from the realities of this world. And by recognizing and feeling their emotions, we've got to say that this is not a weakness to have those feelings. This is not a feeling like you're not coping. It is sad. Mummy and Daddy are sad. Mummy and Daddy are a little bit scared. But you know what? God's there. And just like the more that we talk about it, when we have a child who cuts themselves or grazes themselves, they put a Band-Aid on it, and then it allows the healing process. The same thing, there's been trauma, and by talking about it and coming alongside them with the routines and having fun with them and allowing them that opportunity is part of the healing process. And actually to bring in that about God, who is sovereign, and even though we cannot explain, God's got his ways are higher than our ways. His purposes are higher than our purposes, but His love never fails. And, we can't even comprehend the love, the depth, the height of His love. And this is why we need to talk about who He is and what He means to us. And if we can give that to our children, that's one of the greatest gifts we can give to them.
Well, our Christian faith is our friend, especially in moments like this, when there is a time of national tragedy, and how we are able to speak into our own children's lives so that they might be resilient and able to handle images that they are seeing, traumatizing images. And we might feel traumatized ourselves as parents. Again, relying on our faith and knowing our God, understanding where a sinful nature, where the rubber hits the roads, and the evil that can result from the outworking of things that come from that sinful nature in the killing of one another. Brett and Kate Ryan lead Focus on the Family. Brett, you mentioned a couple of resources. I wonder whether parenting in the midst of tragedy was one of them. You mentioned another resource too for parents to get a hold of immediately from Focus on the Family. What was that other second one you mentioned?
It's called When God Doesn't Make Sense. It's a little bit deeper and it's a little bit more rich, but the practical one is, parenting in the midst of tragedy. That will be a very good start, and it's just a free downloadable resource that people can have access. But the other one is When God Doesn't Make Sense, and that's a variety of things. When things happen in our worlds, and we scratch our heads. How could God allow it? But this is the mystery, and I was reminded about this talking with my own children the other day when something bad was happened, and I said, remember when you were young? And I talked about this. If we believe in God's miracles, which we all do, we have to believe in God's mysteries, and this is one of those mysteries.
Wonderful stuff. Families.org.au to access those resources. As a concerned parent, or you might be a concerned grandparent, you want to arm yourself and be able to understand your own children and what they might be going through as they are facing the processing of the things that they have been seeing on their screen. Brett and Kate Ryan lead Focus on the Family in Australia, families.org.au. Brett, thanks so much for sharing your heart with us today on 2020.
You're more than welcome. God bless.
Well, we've got some coverage today of what's going on, what Christian leaders are saying about the Bondi massacre that happened late yesterday. Another guest to welcome along to our conversation today is Bob Mendelsohn. Bob leads Jews for Jesus. Bob's joining us. Hey, Bob, welcome along.
Hi, Neil. How are you today?
I'm really well, Bob, and but distressed in thought and emotion, just like so many Australians are right now. I wonder, Bob, share with us, what you were feeling as this was unfolding late yesterday on our screens. What were you feeling? Where were you?
I was watching the television. My family was gathered at our home in Sydney. The tragedy was rippling across not just our world, but across all of Australia, in fact, all of the world. I remember watching the TV late at night when 9/11 happened, and was sitting next to the radio when John Kennedy was shot in 1963. It had that same feel of remorse and sadness and disappointment and horror and shock. It had all those things in it. And then as the story unveiled and we learned about 15 or 16 people dead, we learned about 40 injured, I learned about a little 10-year-old girl who was actually part of her grandmother, and she had been to our Shabbat gathering a week ago, and now she's dead. It just came home in a very riveting, personal way. And the danger is when people want revenge or they want to blame somebody else besides two madmen who had guns. It's just so painful to watch, and all I could do was watch and then pray. Now we've got some other ideas, but those moments were real, and grief is powerful.
Bob, what have you heard from the Jewish community that you're connected to? Have you heard any sort of outpouring of grief, or has there been
constantly? Yeah. Look, we are Jewish. Jews for Jesus is a Jewish group, and so we are part of that community that feels it and experiences it. And so I was just on a call with a few other people, one of whom was at the St. Ives celebration in the north of Sydney last night, and another one who was actually at the event where the shooting took place. And we're praying together. We're grieving with one another, if you will, a group hug, but it's so much more than that. And the grief is real, and we're checking with each other in that "are you okay" situation. That is, Eliphaz the Temanite sat for 7 days with Job and his other two friends in the time of grief. But if they'd have just waited another 8 or 9 days, they might not have had the whole book of Job. The grief was real. His explanation was not so kosher.
Hey, when we talk Jewish community and we talk Hanukkah as a celebration that happens this time every year, well, it goes 8 days, doesn't it, Hanukkah?
Yes.
Day one has seen a tragedy like what we've seen at Bondi. What will the Jewish community feel through the remainder of the 7 days?
They'll be circling their wagons and staying close. They're canceling various activities. They're hiring more security for other activities. The schools are all closed, but that was already in place. Hanukkah is a time of family, but it's also public demonstrations with the large menorahs, almost like the large Christmas trees in various places like Martin Place in Sydney and other venues around the country. So those will be either canceled or taken inside into a protected place. Look, it's a dangerous time. Those two might have been part of a network. Those two gunmen might have just been solo artists. We don't know until AZO and others tell us what's what.
Hey, how do we remember the original events that sparked the first Hanukkah? We're going back 2,000 years here. Explain for listeners what the Jewish community celebrates at this time of Hanukkah. And, is there a connection with the sort of tragedy we might have seen yesterday? And does the Hanukkah festival speak into the hearts and lives of people as we process what happened yesterday?
Hanukkah is the Hebrew word for dedication, and it was at the end of a 3-year war between the Maccabees in Judea, who started in the little village called Modin, and battled the Syrian Greeks, the Seleucids, who were the dominant world force in that region in those days. And they had come through and set up idols, basically, and asked people, invited people, to bow down and worship. And Mattathias Maccabee and his 5 sons said, "No, we won't do that," and led a revolt. This is 168 BC. Well, it took 3 years of battle, and the Jewish people, little David versus Goliath, won and pushed the Seleucids out of Jerusalem and the Holy Temple. Now, it was desecrated by the Seleucids, and they had sacrificed a pig on the holy altar. I mean, some really bad things. And there was a lot of people acquiescing to idolatry to survive. Well, the Maccabees led the revolt. They dedicated the temple. They cleansed it. And that's the story. That's the miracle, that the few beat up on the many and won the battle. There is a legendary tale that they found just a jar of oil enough to last for 1 day. And miraculously, the menorah in the Holy Temple there in Jerusalem stayed lit for 8 full days until they could consecrate more oil to replenish. That is a legend. It preaches well. It's a great story, but I prefer the actual miracle, which was not the magic of finding oil. That sounds like Disney, but rather the power of God to sustain the few against the power of the day.
So the power of God. I love it the way you say, yes, there's the history and there's the legend, and the legend, as you say, preaches well. But you can focus on the history and you can see a miracle in itself, the overcoming of the Seleucids by the Maccabean revolt, a 3-year battle. It's just one of so many battles that the people of Israel have had to sustain. Here we are, and there are a lot of listeners who maybe have been, tired of talking about all of the things that have gone on in Israel over these past couple of years since the October 7 attack. All of a sudden it's on our shores. These sorts of things about battles between Israel and its enemies, these are just as real today as they ever were back then. How do you reflect on that?
It is not going away until Jesus puts his foot down on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. When that happens, then the swords will be beaten into plowshares and we won't learn war anymore. Until that day, I'm afraid the Prince of Peace is an idea about which we sing at Christmas time, but it's not enacted. In fact, Neil, it was 1837 when there was no reported war in the world. That was the last year without such a report. Now, it probably was that there was a tribal war somewhere, but we don't know what it was. What I'm saying is that wars and rumors of wars, as you said in your last segment, are going to continue until Jesus comes back. And I'm sorry when people want to have it another way, but Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world." That means there's going to be more and more battles. It's painful. It's grievous.
Bob, when we talk relationship between Christians and Jews, and reflecting on the tragedy of this massacre at Bondi Beach late yesterday, what are you seeing for the coming weeks, maybe into the new year, around the relationship of Christians and Jews here? The Jewish people need to know that they have a friend in the Christian community, don't they?
Spot on, and they do not know that necessarily. The old Yiddish phrase is scratch a Gentile and you find an anti-Semite. So it is in the craw of many, especially older Jewish people. And so I'd say that your listeners, they're on the Vision Network, the Vision family, have a real opportunity just now, or as the South Africans say, now, to communicate to Jewish people in their synagogue, in their community. They know of a Jewish person or they used to work with a Jew. Take time. Don't send an email. Don't send a Facebook message. Get a piece of paper out and handwrite a letter or a card, not a Christmas card, that says, "I'm with you. And have a group of people sign it, 6 different people, 9 people, a whole church sign. A pastor can get his community to sign and go and hand that to a rabbi, put it in the synagogue mailbox if it's open, and communicate, we are with you. Don't worry about politics. Don't worry about saying, we stand with every blue and white flag waving Bibi Netanyahu person. You're not saying that. You're saying, I'm with you, Mrs. Goldberg. I'm with you, Dr. Cohen. So we communicate, and that's what I'm urging Christians to do just now, to take it on board, to communicate with their Jewish friend and neighbor, and even someone they don't know, but they know they're Jewish, and say, I'm with you. You've got a friend.
If you have a Jewish friend or a neighbour, or you work with someone, or you know someone in your community, a very good time to let them know that you stand with them. Hey, I'm interested in your perspective, Bob. There was a display of bravery there when a member of the public snuck up behind one of the shooters yesterday. Yeah. And he's being praised, a very heroic act, really putting his own life on the line. It does appear to be, and I think this is the fact that he's been identified as a Muslim man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm wondering whether you've got any perspective on that, because there are not, we can tar everyone with the same brush. Not everyone is an Islamic extremist.
And not every Jew is pro-Israel, and not every Anglican adores the king. I mean, there's a whole lot of people who have a lot of different perspectives on stuff. So, yeah, that's why I say don't blame. This is not a time to blame. This is a time for Jewish people to look up and cry out to God for assistance. This is not a time to blame. It's not a time to turn the other cheek. It's a time to turn towards God for Jewish people. As far as Christians, a lot of Christians, God help us, here in the West, think that everything Arab is Muslim. I sat last month in Seoul, South Korea, with several Arab Christians, and they were at the World Evangelical Alliance Conference, and I was there. It was an amazing time to sit with these fellows who are the most marginalized in the Middle East, I would say, because there are only 5,000 evangelical Arab Christians, 5,000 out of 2 million in the land of Israel, 2 million. That's like the smallest drop in a bucket. In Bethlehem used to be 80% Christian. Now it's less than 10% because of this impression that everything Arab is Muslim. It's not so. And so it's wrong. And I've got so many emails and Facebooks and phone calls and WhatsApp. I got so many communications from people saying, did you hear that these two Muslims were shooting Jews? I think, yeah, just say there were two people. And I don't know their history. I don't know their story. I learned today they're father and son. Okay. So we don't yell and curse every parent and child because a father and son did this. I mean, it's just wrong and naive and simplistic. The relationship between Jews and Christians and Muslims, it's complex, to say the least.
Wonderful insight, Bob. Hey, just getting you to reflect, and I hope I've got you for another couple of minutes here, but government policy, talking about moving forward. Albo promising to do everything to combat anti-Semitism. I wonder if you've got any insight from where you sit as the leader of Jews for Jesus here in Australia around what ought to be done, what could be done, what should be done. Is the government delivering? Do they say one thing, do another? Have you got a perspective on what needs to be done at a federal level here in Australia?
I'm not privy to who's asking what from whom, so I don't know if Albo and Penny Wong and Chalmers are doing the things that they've been asked. I don't know the emails. So all I can say is I appreciate what the Prime Minister said, what Premier Chris Minns said last night. I appreciate that they're very committed publicly, verbally, to support and to support the Jewish community and to stand against anti-Semitism in any time it rears its ugly head. Are we doing enough? Is anybody doing enough to help mental health issues? Is anybody doing enough to help elderly care or fatherless children? I don't know that government is really the place for all that we expect them to do and be and pay. So all I can say is we as Jews look to ourselves and protect ourselves. We need to look to God and ask Him for our help. Psalm 121 says, Esa enai el harim, unto the hills do I lift up my eyes. Where does my help come from? Oh yeah, my help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth.
Wonderful insight, a grassroots movement. Not necessarily relying on government for all of the solutions to every problem. In saying that, though, is there an open door in the office of the Prime Minister for Jews for Jesus? People, leaders of Jewish and Christian communities to speak into the political debates and the political policy formation at the Prime Minister's office or the Foreign Minister's office? Are there open doors there? Have you got What are your
They
perspectives?
say so. Look, I was at the National Prayer Breakfast last month, and they seemed to indicate that their doors were open. Now, the Prime Minister and Penny Wong were not there, but there were plenty of people, the Attorney General and Leader of Opposition, Andrew Hastie, and all kinds of folks were there. So I'm very confident that what they say publicly, they will say and follow through as much as they can. Look, politics is another world. Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of Canberra, not of Jerusalem." So, look, his kingdom is what I want, and I'm not looking to government to save us. I'm looking to Jesus.
We're all feeling very heavy-hearted right now. Come back to the 8 days of Hanukkah. And the Hanukkah festival is not a competitor with Christians and Christmas. It is very legitimate Jewish celebration time. As you mentioned, the Maccabean Revolt, a 3-year battle, and the Jewish people won. It is a celebration of that. There's the legend around the jar of oil, supposed to only last 1 day. The miracle was it lasted 8 days, through unto victory. What's coming over these next few days when we talk about, making connection with someone in the Jewish community? Jewish people are likely to be celebrating Hanukkah. Is this something that, you can encourage for Christians to understand a little more deeply, to draw alongside fellow Australians who are Jewish? Thoughts from you around those things, Bob?
Sure. I don't think this is the time to say to Mrs. Goldberg, "Can I come to your synagogue Hanukkah service?" I think this is the time to say, whatever you do, I'm standing with you. I think Jewish people are going to be a little more reserved and a little more, how shall I say, looking over their shoulder, like October 7th did globally. So I'm not recommending that people volunteer to come to an event such as that. I know many people have canceled their Hanukkah public events and are going almost like we would call house churches. And look, that's what we're doing. We canceled 2 of our Hanukkah events in Sydney, and we're just having house and house. And that's the way it's going to be until we're sure that these 2 gunmen were not part of a club.
Hey, Bob, I have had lots of guests on this morning and reflecting on a lot of different dimensions. I'm wondering if I put you on the spot here and ask you to lead us in prayer. Are you open to that? As the leader of Jews for Jesus, I wonder whether, I think out of all of the guests that I've had on, any one of them could have prayed a beautiful prayer that might have, invited the presence of our loving God into a circumstance now where there is grief and there is trauma and there is suffering. Are you available to lead us in a short prayer?
Yeah. A little correction. I'm not the leader of Jews for Jesus anymore. I did for 25 years, but I'm still here. All right. But yeah, I did learn a couple things whilst doing that.
Good.
One of which is when someone says, "Would you like to pray?" the answer is always yes. And the Ecclesiastes reminder that when you come before the Creator, don't let your words be a lot. Keep it small. Keep it short. Yeah. And so, hence I will join you, Neil. Thanks. Let's pray.
Let's pray.
You are our God, and in you we trust. We don't look to the world for sustaining. We don't look to governments to prosper us. We don't look at the enemies of our people as if they are the enemies. We war not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, and all the wrong in the heavenly places. You, God, are our hope, our shield, our everlasting life. We pray today for the Jewish people in Bondi, in Sydney, in St. Ives, and all around this country, that they will know the comfort of the Almighty by being present with Him, by looking up to Him, like the children of Israel looked up to a serpent in the wilderness and give them life. We pray that they will find eternal life in Messiah himself. I pray for the Christians who are listening on this radio show, that you would equip them with Rahmanas, real mercy and grace and comfort out of their gut to pass on to others. The comfort they've received, may they comfort others for such a time as this. Our times are in your hands. We trust you for this day, the first day of Hanukkah, for this third week of Advent, for this 10 days until Christmas in which we find ourselves. We trust you with our lives, with our families, with our neighbors, those we know and those we don't yet know. Lead us for your purposes in Yeshua, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, Bob Mendelsohn, I want to thank you so much for taking some time to share your heart with us today, and I know that there'll be listeners, and whether they be Christian or Jewish, whether they be not of any of the flavours, but just happen to be listening in. It's been just a valuable insight to be able to hear from you and express your heartbeat. And yes, a former leader of Jews for Jesus, Bob Mendelsohn. And for listeners to connect with the Jews for Jesus organisation, their connecting point on their website, jewsforjesus.org. That's jewsforjesus.au.
.org.au, yeah. Okay. We're in Australia. Here we are.
Fabulous. Bob, thank you so much for sharing these insights and your heart with us today on 2020.
My pleasure, Neil. God bless you and Merry Messiahmas.